Hi, I am Dr. Reddy. Welcome to Interview Questions and FAQs Session 3 of Software Testing. Today we are going to discuss about the interview questions. What is debugging? Explain the process of debugging. Explain the steps involved in debugging process. See, this debugging activity is related to the software developer, and now as a software test engineer you should know about the debugging, the process of debugging, and what are the different steps that are involved in debugging. So how it is related to the software test engineer? See, for automation test engineers, this debugging activity is very important because the automation software test engineers has to do some coding. If they are using any automation tool, they have to do some coding. For these automation test engineers, the concept of debugging is very important. Anyhow, if you are attending for the software test engineer position interview, then you should know about the debugging. This is very important. For the development, obviously for the software developers, this is most important question. Now, they may ask you what is debugging, or they may ask you explain the process of debugging, or they may ask you what are the different steps or the various steps that are involved in the process of debugging or in the debugging mechanism. Right? Now see, what is debugging? Simple. See, if the software developer designs some code, while designing the code, there is a chance of doing some mistakes in the code. These mistakes will create an error in the code. If the errors are present in the code, it is not acceptable. If the errors are present in the software code, that code is not useful. Then, if the errors are present in the code, what the software developer or what the automation software test engineer has to do? They have to rectify these errors. How they will rectify these errors? By identifying where that mistake is present in the code. Say for example, you have written 100 lines of statements. Now, while compilation, after compilation or execution, the system will show the errors, this many number of errors and this many number of warnings. Now, these errors has to be resolved. How you have to resolve these errors? By identifying those mistakes in the code. Right? Now, see, if these errors are resolved perfectly, then the code will be used. If these errors are not resolved by the software developer or by the automation software test engineer, what will happen? If the errors are present in the code, those errors will create a defect in the software, right? Which is not acceptable. So, what is the debugging? The process of identifying and resolving the mistakes in the code is called as debugging. So, this is the definition of debugging. The process of identifying and resolving the mistakes in the code is called as debugging. So, say for example, you have designed 100 lines of code. In this 100 lines of code, where this mistake is present in the code, say for example, in the 45th line of statement, there is a mistake in the code. Then immediately, you have to resolve, you have to rectify that mistake. How you will rectify that mistake? By doing some modifications for the code. Right? So this is called debugging. So the debugging mechanism, what is this debugging? The process of identifying and resolving the mistakes in the code is called as debugging. Right? Now see. So what are the different steps involved in the debugging mechanism or debugging process? So how this debugging process will happen? How the software developer, concerned software developer or the concerned automation software test engineer will do debugging. See, first step, identify the exact point where programming mistake is present in the code. That means you have to identify the exact line of statement where that mistake is present in the code. After identifying that exact line of statement, now you have to analyze and you have to understand that mistake. So that means first you have to analyze why this mistake happened. What is the criteria for doing this mistake? Either it may be a misunderstanding in the concept, or maybe while designing the code you might have done some mistake unknowingly. And you have to understand that mistake also. Right? After analyzing and understanding that mistake, you have to correct that mistake. Correcting the mistake in the code is nothing but resolving the mistake in the code. Right? So, resolve the mistake. How you will resolve that mistake? How you will correct that mistake? By doing some modifications in the mistake, which is present in the program. So, correct the mistake by modifying the code in the program. After correcting, after resolving the mistake in the code, that is error in the code, then what you are supposed to do? You have to rerun that modified code. For what? To check or to verify whether the mistake in the code is resolved properly or not. Whether this, why should you rerun the modified code? Because to verify or to check whether the mistake in the code is resolved properly and completely or not. For this process you have to do rerun the modified code. So these are the 4 different steps that are involved in the debugging process. Okay? So if they ask you in the interview, if they ask you what are the different steps or the various steps or what is the process of debugging, or what are the different steps that are involved in the debugging process, you have to explain these 4 points correctly. How much time you have to take for explaining this answer for this question? You have to take at least 3 to 4 minutes. So you have to explain them correctly, slowly, step by step, step by step, step by step. No hurry, right? No confusion. With the full clarity you have to explain. Next. So, the MCQs regarding debugging. These MCQs will help you in technical screening test, and also these MCQs, multiple choice questions, will help you in the competitive exams like a GATE exam or a ISTQB exam or any other exams. Right? Now, which of the following statements correctly reflect the relationship between testing and debugging? Now, see. What that means, there are 4 options. You have to choose the correct statement or the correct option which correctly reflects the relationship between testing and debugging. What do you mean by testing? Finding the defect. What is the debugging? Correcting the mistake in the code. Why you got the defect? Because of presence of error in the code. Why you got the error in the code? Because of the mistake is present in the code. Like this you have to analyze. Yeah. Debugging identifies the location of the defect in the code. Testing can identify the failures caused by the defects. Debugging finds the failure in the system behavior. Testing phase replaces the debugging. You have to choose the correct statements. Right? Now, which is the correct option? Option B is correct one. That is, First statement and the second statement are corrected. Debugging identifies the location of the defect in the code, that is a mistake in the code. And the testing can identify the failures caused by the defects. Yes or no? But debugging finds the failure in the system behavior, it's wrong. Testing phase replaces the debugging is also wrong. So option B is correct. Like this, you have to read each and every option thoroughly, and you have to analyze each and every option, and you have to understand this each and every option. Then only it will become easy for you to answer this type of questions. Next, what is the meaning of debugging? Root cause analysis of the problem, finding location of the problem and fixing the problem, same as testing. Just going through the code and checking for what caused error. See, you have to read each and every option thoroughly, and you have to analyze and you have to understand. These questions are very interesting questions which will help you more in the competitive exams. And also, if you analyze each and every option, then you will get more command on the subject, which you will never forget in future. Right? So, option B is correct one. That is only the debugging. Finding the location of the problem. Here the problem is a mistake in the code. After finding, you have to fix the problem. Fixing is nothing but resolving or correcting. See, correcting the error or resolving the error or fixing the error, all are same. You can use any nomenclature. You can use any name. Correcting the error or fixing the error or resolving the error. All these three are same. You can use any name. Right? Like this you have to understand the concept of debugging and also the each and every options for this questions. Right? So please subscribe my channel and share my video sessions to all the students groups, those who are searching for the job in the IT industry. And please don't forget to raise your comments in the comment box, because your feedback will help me more so that I can modify the lectures. Right? Thank you. Thank you very much.